Welcome to Where's the Any Key, the podcast where we talk shop about topics, tips, and trends for the modern IT admin. I'm your host, Ryan Bacon, the IT support manager at JumpCloud. Joining me today is Brian Coleman. He is the owner of Matchstick Birmingham, an up-and-coming IT firm in Birmingham, Alabama. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Oh, thank you. I'm really great to be here.
All right. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, awesome. So I got my start in IT and in technology quite a long time ago. I was fortunate enough to be the son of a graduate student mom who was working on her doctorate in computer science and statistics, and would take me to the computer lab of the university that she was attending almost every night as she was working on her dissertation. And so I got my first kind of introduction to technology from essentially sitting in the corner of the computer lab with the IBM PC that they had at the time. It ran on two floppy disks, two 5¼ inch floppies. While she was off doing real work on mainframes, I was teaching myself DOS, and I was teaching myself, just kind of what a computer was back then. So since that time, I've just always had an interest. I got carried into high school years with the very first beginnings of the concept that we call networking today. Back then it was all dial-up. It was all calling these BBS systems, and just all the at that time fun, new, cool technology that we'd never even seen before. And from there it was dial-up internet connections and the internet in general. And then when I finally graduated from college, I got the opportunity to work for a telecommunications company. And that's when I really got my feet under me and said, this is what I want to do. And since then, it's been one good ride. I had the opportunity 2 years ago, next month, 2 years ago, to start my own IT consulting firm. And I'm it's been the best thing I've ever done. I'm so happy, and I'm not looking back. And yeah, I think that when you spend what's going to be almost 30 years of experience in technology, you kind of get to share some good stories. You get to make some interesting opinions. And so I'm really glad that you guys have me here. I'm looking forward to talking about stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Good to have you here too. And to go on a little bit of a tangent right at the very beginning, I also used to frequent a lot of bulletin boards, and
Oh yeah?
And a couple of years ago, I found out that I used to go on there to to play their adventure games and stuff that they would have, and I found out that one of the games that I used to play a lot was still active and still had an active BBS set up.
Really?
And I was able to get I jumped onto Putty and connected it and relived some of my high school days.
So somebody's running just an SSH server out there that you can log into, and
yeah,
this is like an old mud game.
Yeah, it was an old mud, so it was
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was definitely a blast from the past.
I remember, post BBSs, but kind of before the internet was a thing. It was in that weird time when America Online was considered the internet. When I got to school my freshman year and sat down at a terminal that was it was actually a Spark station, if y'all remember what those were, and logged in and suddenly realized that there were like 500 other people logged into the system at the same time. And coming from a goofy nerd kid in Texas, dialing up bulletin boards where you might find a board with another person logged on, to have 500 people to interact with it's a whole new world. I didn't know what to do with myself for a good solid 2 months. I had a lot of catching up to do with grades after that. I could do that.
I imagine.
Yeah.
All right. So going on to what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to talk about security tools. And to kick things off, I want to get your opinion on with security tools, so like endpoint protection, antivirus, that sort of things.
Right.
In your mind, at what point does the benefits of the tool become overshadowed or outweighed by the resources required by the tool. So the impact on system performance and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big thing, obviously, because not only, I mean, every year we realize more and more that security is becoming the foundation of our interaction on all the networks, whether it's internet or private networks or whatever. Um, so it's a need. The need for adequate and robust security tools will never go away. But all of us, eh, probably more than once, have had the occasion to realize frustratingly that the security tool that is being used on the machine that you're working with is preventing you from doing the work that you need to be doing on that machine. And that could either be anything from just massive resource overutilization as this security tool scans across bigger and bigger hard drives and consuming more and more CPU to do these more intense scans. It could also be to the point where application whitelisting may come into effect, and the build of, let's say, Word or Excel that you just got through Microsoft Update hasn't actually made it to the application whitelisting centralized knowledge base and or centralized server, and it won't let you run it, and it's just Word, and it's not even a weird version of Word you got from a back alley. It's the Word that came from Microsoft Update. So I think that in order for a security tool to truly be effective, it not only has to do the job technically, but it has to do it in a way that is so non-interfering that it almost just becomes an afterthought to the user. And I don't think we've quite gotten there yet.
Yeah, I think things have gotten better, but yeah, there's still definitely a quite a ways to go. And I'd imagine you run into this too, but like we have users who are admins on their systems, because it's part of their jobs and they need it. But like when that scheduled scan hits and it spikes their CPU, they'll just go in there and kill the process.
Right.
And that completely negates the advantage of having it there.
Not only that, it's in my opinion, it's actually worse than not
Yeah.
having it there. It's
Yeah.
this false confidence that no, the machine's protected because we know it has endpoint protection on it. It's reporting back to our console. We can see it. Yeah, it hasn't run a scan in like 3 months, but we'll get around to it. That's a far worse and dangerous situation than a truly unprotected device on your network, because at least in that point, you know what you're dealing with.
That's very true. And it could be one of those things where it becomes a huge hindrance, because I've seen it happen where somebody will stop the scan, whether by killing the process, rebooting their system, something like that, but it'll just keep the protection just keeps trying to scan. So instead of having that headache for an hour or so while the scan happens, they end up dragging it out for days.
Yep.
And it's other, the whole not having the protection and all that aside, it just becomes a huge headache for our customer, for the person using the system, because it's causing this interference, and honestly it can make the IT team look bad, because it's either why did they issue us this piece of garbage laptop that's always that the fans are always kicking in and it's always overheating, or why are we using this antivirus thing that is horrible.
Right. And I was just going to mention that's one of the kind of resource kills that a security tool can do. Isn't so much like killing a laptop or maybe preventing someone from doing their work, but this kind of constant dark cloud that an IT department has, that they're not doing the best they can, because everyone has this certain kind of baseline cosmic radiation level of complaining. So again, like, the best security tools are the tools that you don't even realize are doing their jobs. And The other side of it, we kind of tend to focus on like hardware utilization and the ability for an end user to get their job done on a laptop. But what I'm seeing more is the idea of centralized logging and the ability to aggregate all of these security events into a place and then have that information there starts to demand resources from a different part of the company, and that's people. Um,
Yes.
so not only do you have the hardware side possibly burning up and churning to get through the technical scanning of the zeros and ones, but now you have to have a group of people devoted to the results of that scan. And what does that mean? It's almost an analogy to your other example of a developer that kills the scan, every time it starts up, and now you have this dangerous protected yet monitored, or sorry, unprotected yet monitored system. The same thing is true with, all this aggregated logging and scan results information. You have to have enough people to look at that information and make rational and timely decisions based upon that information, or it's not even worth having. And that resource, that's so resource intensive, right?
It really is. I mean, you depending on the size of your fleet and your employee base and everything. I mean, you almost, if you're going to do this yourself, you almost need your own security operations center
Right. I'm
running.
seeing
And
more and more customers. Granted, Matchstick is dealing our customer base or smallish organizations, mid-tier organizations, anything from say 50 to 300 people. And even the smallest companies I'm working with, 25 people, they've already talked about SOC. They've already talked about getting a devoted security framework. And this could be just a 25 person architecture firm. But
yeah,
it's gotten to the place where that is a common concern, even for small business owners that have nothing to do with security compliance.
yeah, and I think yeah, and I think that's the reason why you see these security companies who are going up and offering SOC as a service.
Yeah.
So like your ones that bundle it with endpoint protection, like CrowdStrike or Sentinel-1, or even ones that like we'll go and we'll put an appliance in your network. So like what is it? Arctic Wolf, I think, is one of them.
Yeah,
We'll go
Canary's
and
another
put
good
that
one.
in there.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
Canary, I believe. And I like
Okay.
the idea of these kind of like, throw it in your network honeypots. Because, when I first heard about the idea, I was like, man, I wish I would have thought about it myself. It's a very, very low footprint uh, thing to install in a network, and it can immediately bring back some pretty strong returns on that
Mm-hmm.
small footprint investment.
Yeah, and I think that it's if you look at the price for these things. I know that when we the last place that I worked was a nonprofit, was a fairly small nonprofit, and I ended up talking to somebody at Arctic Wolf, and the price was it's a very interesting balance, because granted it's not a low ball, it's not cheap, but when you compare it to like how much would it cost you to run your own, to have a full-time security person reviewing that, then it's a bargain.
Right.
But then you come into the tricky part of explaining that to the finance department, or to the executive team, or whoever makes the decision and signs off on that sort of thing.
Right, right. That's one of the reasons why it's always interesting when I run into a potential client or even a customer where their internal IT division runs up through their finance side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so common because
Yeah.
IT's never been a revenue generating department. And so it falls into the business operational expense like everything else. But that means so many times those IT decisions are based on financial reasoning. And
Mm-hmm.
and and sometimes those decisions may or may not work out, you know.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's hard to kind of get that last yard in and say, these are the things that we need to do. And it's a great tool, might be mid-tier expensive, but here's the rewards for them. Now, one thing I am seeing today more than ever is that the operation sides and the finance sides of these customers I'm working with are much more um, open to spending money on security and spending money on even things like a SOC, an outsourced SOC, compared to what the environment was like 10 years ago. 10 or 15 years
Yeah,
ago, that didn't exist. And today, now, even the CFOs are saying, what do we need? How do I need to get us to the security position we need to be in? And that's really cool.
it is. And I think a big part of that has to do with how publicly communicated a lot of these like data breaches have become. And part of that, part of the reporting on these data breaches is how much how much like monetary damage was involved in that. And I think that that's, that really does help the people who are just on the business or finance side of things really see that, hey, this investment is worth it.
Right.
So I mean, I've been fortunate that like I've only had to deal with a single ransomware attack, and our disaster recovery program, practices were sufficient to recover from it without having to pay out. And
Right.
we only lost like maybe an hour's worth of data on a Monday morning. So there was really there really wasn't a big loss there.
Right.
So, but I got lucky. I fully admit, I got really lucky.
I think that the IT world is full of stories that you have and that I would have about how close you were to not dodging that bullet.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even realize it until maybe a few days later after you've done, the post work on it, and you've gone through and you've figured out exactly every second of that night leading up to your Monday morning discovery. And then you see there is that one moment in time where had something gone just slightly different, the outcome would have been catastrophic, right? And that's good, because I hope those stories that you say and the stories that I share with customers kind of echo and they resonate up through the leadership, and hopefully it makes a difference. I think that you're kind of getting back to what we were talking about with security tools doing their job, but not doing their job, doing their job and doing their job in a way that is the most beneficial to the end users and the management. I hope that with the ever increasing pace of kind of machine learning and AI and the ability for, if you just feed enough raw information into some really smart, to use the term poorly, algorithms, you'll start to get some results quickly, and you'll start to get meaningful results quickly. So going back to the idea of, you've got a good endpoint protection strategy in place. You are collecting events and sending them to a centralized aggregation server such that something or someone can look at those events. Today, that's where it kind of breaks, because either you have a trained staff that's watching these things, or you have a trained staff in conjunction with some back-end intelligence to kind of trigger on certain events or certain series of events. But that still requires, it almost requires knowledge of the attack before the attack. It kind of goes back to the whole like 0-day vulnerability issue.
Right.
It'd be wonderful if at some point in the near future that SIEM, that log aggregation technology in the background, isn't just looking for signatures or a series of events, but actually getting smarter every day, kind of thing.
Right.
Because then you can just turn the service on and say, all right, let's go. Let me know when things get bad. And that's going to be a big point, because at that point, if the agents on the endpoints aren't consuming the endpoints to death, and you don't have to devote 25, or 50 eyeballs, 25 people to look through all of your logs, you can start making big headway.
Yeah, and I think that with we're going through a process of evaluating vendors for this sort of thing right now. Because it's always a good idea to reassess what you're using and what is out there. And what I've been seeing is that they are definitely making progress and leaning in on the whole machine learning side of things, and that kind of alerting is I think it's closer than we may think, but in my mind, where the big disconnect happens is in the remediation part of things, because you whether you get your alerts, whether it's from a signature's detected, or you have one of these machine learning platforms going, or just however you get the information, then what do you do? How do you know how to best deal with these, especially when you start getting these self-replicating and these really intelligent types of malware that it's not a simple matter of killing a process, deleting a registry entry, and deleting some files.
Yeah.
Like you have to know like where this stuff is, and this is something that I saw, that like really like dawned on me like severely during some of these demos that I saw, because like I look at, they give examples of some of the remediation steps, and like even the person doing the demos, like it will take me 30 minutes to an hour to do this, but our the team that works on it, that does this all the time, that 50 eyeballs of people looking at this, that do this, like how can they can do it quickly, but how can an internal team, probably a very small team, how can they manage to keep up with that sort of thing?
Right. That's a great question, because I mean, I think more than ever today, the response to an incident is going to be incredibly heavy-handed, and that may be
Mm-hmm.
good. I don't really know how to where I land on that. Um, I mean, if we're looking at this conversation through the lens of security shouldn't get in the way of people doing their work, well, at the point where I have to come take a laptop from somebody because it's triggered all sorts of security events, I've pretty
Mm-hmm.
much prevented them from doing their work in a security manner, right?
Right.
Um, but you know, then you have to weigh in what you just said, the intelligence that the ever increasing intelligence that attackers are using almost requires a pretty strong response from the get-go. You can't wait very long to kind of figure out what you're dealing with, because by that time it could be too late. Um,
Yeah.
and so that would be, I mean, that would be a great, the great next advance in security tools, endpoint protection especially, would be, with the help of that, you know, highly specific intelligence built into the back end to detect threats. Then the next step would be to have that intelligence tell the endpoint to react to the threats and do it in a way that mitigates the problem, but doesn't like completely ruin the user from ever being able to do anything that day.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I may be just talking science fiction here at this point, because I'm not even sure how I could imagine that would happen. So, but that's a great thing. I mean, I'm in my mind as a technical kind of problem solver, I'm starting to think about like, well, maybe we can just virtualize it. We can containerize everything in a laptop. So if you have an issue with a part of it, you just shut the container down and never worry about that again. And something else can pop up in its place. But even that isn't going to really solve what we're talking about. But I feel that should be the end result. I think that the full cycle of detection, um, well, not just detection, the full cycle of attack, detection, decision on action, and remediation has to be incredibly fast and almost invisible to the user. And at that
Yeah.
point, we will have a solid like security footprint. That may be something that needs to be built into OSs, coming down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. True. I mean, because it is. Oh man. But then that comes. I think with building it into OSs, how much of one of the things that we have to look at when we're evaluating these kind of products and these kind of platforms is what happens locally and what happens on the cloud. Like
Right.
how much of this analysis happens on the machine, on on the client side.
I don't know, and this goes back to the argument that will never be won, which is, do you want to have incredibly um, powerful endpoints, ever faster processors and ever faster RAM in endpoints in order to keep up with the needs of a security tool, or do you try to offload that and let those decisions be made like in the cloud, and trust on connectivity and other things to make that circle of attack, detection, action, mitigation work. I don't know. I mean, there was to kind of speak to my my old man experience in IT when cloud as we know it today really started to take off. When Amazon and Microsoft were trying to kill each other on who was going to own cloud, I was that guy that was like, nope, nope, physical data centers, nope, I don't want to spend a dime on cloud. And looking back on it, I realized that was an idiot decision to make. Um, but I just never had the belief that you could do what needed to be done, in this completely outsourced, cloud data center thing. Um, I think that there's no other way around it these days. That you're always going to have some component of that security cycle, that circle I was talking about, in the cloud or in some way to be able to aggregate that data and make decisions upon it. Um, but yeah, I don't know if the answer is to just make hardware better and better. I mean, obviously that's going to happen because that's the way you get new laptops every year. But maybe you shouldn't just leverage that new hardware to, make your security tool consume a little bit more CPU because it can get away with it. I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah. Well, I say one thing that I like, that's kind of along these lines, is with Chromebooks. I mean, I remember not too long ago, if you mentioned Chromebooks in an IT sense, you were like, people would stare death at you.
I know.
But I will say one thing that they do really well is that, they are, you can take the nuclear option on them and they recover from it so quickly.
Yep.
You can erase it, then you log back in to it and all your stuff comes back down and it pretty much sets itself back up. So at that point, I mean, if it were me and I was if I had an office of people just who were using just web applications and I guess you could say standard office work where they could do their word processing and stuff like that on either on G Suite or on Office 365 on the online tools, I would so push out a fleet of Chromebooks. But the fact of the matter is that there's practically no offices that are just like that. And especially like here at Jump Cloud where, you have, development teams.
Yeah.
I will say Chromebooks have gotten better on that side, but they're still not, there's still some stuff to be desired on them, and they're just something you can't do.
I mean, they will always be considered a tool. They're a toaster, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's funny that you mentioned, you don't see an office like that, but one of my biggest customers here in Birmingham uses a fleet of 100 and something Chromebooks, in addition to a pretty big Mac footprint. But the primary role of the Chromebook users is they do a lot of voice over IP calling and a lot of interaction with like SMS and texting and stuff like that. And so there's a standard stack, and it all works within browser. It all works within Chrome. And so we issue out Chromebooks, and you're right, the management is so amazing on that. Like you can nuke one from orbit and no big deal, right? Or I've never had a fear of some strange, attack vector on a Chromebook because they only do what they do. And so,
exactly.
I mean, and even if there was, even if somebody wanted to use a Chrome exploit to get into a shell on a Chromebook, like you say, all you do is you just zap it and you're back to where you started. I hope that at some point, some of the like what I jadedly call like a real laptop, and that's no disservice to Chromebooks, but a real laptop could kind of have that same functionality.
Yeah.
One thing that's super interesting to me, and I've talked with others about this. With sorry, tangent. Bear with me. This actually has some
by all
relevance.
means.
With the introduction of Apple Silicon and Apple making their own, down to the guts hardware, there is this kind of bubbling rumor that Apple is going to come out with some sort of Chromebook-like, competitor.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's not a tablet, but it's not a MacBook Air. It's a MacBook SE or something like that,
Right.
And like I cannot wait for that, because my hope is that it will have not only the horsepower to kind of outclass some Chromebooks, but also have that ability to manage it like I can manage a Chromebook today using, Google Workspace. If I can manage this new hypothetical Apple product through the MDM framework that is really growing and really getting stronger and stronger every year, that is going to be a game changer. And I would go back to my client that's running, 100 something Chromebooks, and I would say, the next time we start talking about a hardware refresh cycle, let's think about throwing this Apple product in.
Right. And
Because
honestly, yeah, I would push for that too. And I was thinking along those same lines, like with how the direction MDM's going in, how long until we get to that point where you can have essentially a time machine backup that works through MDM.
right.
If that, so you have, your managed Apple IDs in Apple Business Manager, and so if the person gets issued a new laptop, they log into that Apple ID and it just pulls that image on there.
Yeah, just like a cloud-based time machine backup, right?
Exactly. And I know it's a pipe dream, but
I don't know.
But it's starting more and more to seem like it's in the realm of possibility. And I would jump on that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think it would just be truly amazing, because like you're saying before, in the security cycle, if you do run into something where you feel that this, this hypothetical Apple thing is compromised, like you do with a Chromebook, you just whack it, and in the back end, you could have intelligence that's scanning through those, what we call the cloud-based, time machine backup. You're scanning through that thing to make sure that it's clean, such that when the machine gets brought online, it is restored to a clean state. I mean, that means the response and mitigation for something like that would be in the matter of minutes. And how cool is that, right?
Yeah, that would be awesome. And because with going back to like how advanced and complicated these attacks and this malware is getting, I mean, really, for those of us IT people who are not spending all of our time dealing with security threats, us normal IT people, I mean, really, it becomes the nuclear option really is the only way to be sure.
True. And I do appreciate, and I concur with your assessment that security folks are abnormal.
I will
completely kidding all of my security friends.
Yeah, I adore the people on our security team.
Yes,
but
because what happens if you don't. No, really, I think that not only for the overworked IT staff, the nuclear option starts to become more realistic, by the minute. But also, I'm working with a lot of customers that have to have some pretty strict certification, regulatory certification, HIPAA, high trust, things like that. And in those security frameworks, that is the only answer. Like if you know you have a compromised machine and you want to maintain your high trust attestation, you just whack it. You boil it down to the bare metal. And in a lot of cases, they don't even let you bring the bare metal back online. Like in a lot of cases, that thing's just gone. Just go shred it.
Yeah.
So in those environments, the idea of the nuclear option is not nuclear anymore. That's just the option. And if you could, in this hypothetical world with this magic Apple device that can download the cloud-based time machine backups, but if you could, go through the effort to get that process, certified, get it to pass attestations, that'd be such a winner. If you could say that this hypothetical, zapping the device from afar and then reloading it with a known clean image satisfies the requirements. Oh man, I mean, it would be a whole new world, because
Yeah, that would be.
There's so much stuff that happens on the back end when you have a compromised system in some of these regulated environments where you've done the right thing, you've pulled it offline, you've nuked it, there's nothing left, but then there's all of this kind of like post-mortem work to show that the thing's never going to come back online, and to prove that you're doing all the right thing. If you could just, in 20 years when this thing that we're talking about comes online, show that you click the button did the thing, and now the thing is back to the way it needs to be, and that satisfies all of the promises and regulations. Oh, off to the races, man. There's nothing better than that.
Okay, so whoever's out there that's going to set this thing up, remember who you heard it from?
That's right. That's right. I just want a 1%, just 1%. We'll split it, me and Ryan.
All right, sounds good. So, it's so interesting to think about like where things are going, and I mean what we want, like what our wish list is.
Yeah.
And taking it, looking back, like look at what your wish list was 20 years ago, and look at where you are now.
Yeah.
So
my wish list 20 years ago was to just have connectivity that was consistent, and didn't require weird cabling and 9-volt batteries and junk like that. And now my wish is like, maybe we don't need that connectivity like we used to, like we wanted so bad. Maybe I need a different kind of connectivity. But yeah, you're so right. The way things are changing is amazing, and I'm excited. And it gives a guy like me who, makes a living and enjoys technology as a hobby and just kind of lives in technology. It gives a guy like me a ton of excitement to see what's coming down the road.
Yeah, and to loop it back to the security tools and kind of what you were saying, it goes about having it be useful, secure, and still accessible.
Right.
And to that saying that gets thrown around everywhere, that you can't have something be secure and user friendly at the same time.
Yes.
And in some regards I disagree. In other regards I agree with it. So the part that I agree with is when it comes to the actual security tooling. So when it comes to the antivirus, to the endpoint protection, to EDR, everything like that, that's not quite to the point of being able to be like, it's secure and it's user friendly.
Yeah.
It's secure and it's invisible. That I liked how you put that.
Yeah.
So I think
secure and is as invisible as it can be. Yeah. And I think we're shooting for secure and invisible. And yeah, I agree with you. I think the end goal is secure and user friendly, and we just have a ways to go.
Yeah, I think where I would start putting the pushback is not necessarily on the tooling, but on policy and practice. So yeah. I think that you can kind of try to offset the security tooling that's not very user friendly with more user friendly like IT practices. So right. So for example, how you respond to people who have been compromised and everything like that. And it really comes down to the mindset that you go on. So like here at Jump Cloud, we've mentioned this before on other episodes, but it can't be said too many times. Our internal stance on dealing with compromise with situations where somebody clicks on the wrong link, loses their laptop, something like that, is the fact that accidents happen. It happens. People make mistakes, and we don't, we try to foster that environment where we're not, you're not going to get in trouble by letting us know what happened.
Yeah.
What's the problem is going to be is if something happens and you try to hide it.
Right.
So
that's a really good point you're making. Yeah.
And so that makes it, and we get, it's very common. I've had it happen a few times today already where people are like, hey, they'll reach out to me on Slack or an email, but like, hey, can you take a look at this email or something like that? And we'll do that because, we've established that relationship with everybody in the organization that, you can come to us. We're not going to judge you. We're not, we're not going to yell at you because you clicked on a link or you lost something or something's going weird on your system. And that right there, I feel helps offset at least the stress that can be involved with the security thing and makes the process more user friendly. So they could come to us. And also it's good for us because if people are coming to us and not trying to hide things, then we catch more things.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that when you think back to, say, again, like 20 years ago, when the idea of threats and compromised systems was real, but still a little bit new. I remember many occasions when someone would get an issue, either compromised system or a compromised account, and wouldn't report it because they were afraid of the consequences. They were afraid they were going to get in trouble. And compare that to today, when I think now more than ever people understand that security is the work of the entire village, and so the concept of getting in trouble doesn't really exist anymore. And I think to kind of tie this back with what we were talking about, to the hypothetical best security tool is the one that does its job, does it invisibly, but also encourages people to react appropriately, to report issues that they see happening, and not be afraid of reporting, either because there's not a negative consequence to reporting, but also they're not going to, let me see how I can say this. They're not going to, quote unquote, get in trouble for reporting, but they're also not going to lose the productivity that they're needing in that day. Let's see if I can make an example. Yes, we have a user. The user has clicked on a phishing email, probably has gotten at least some credentials compromised, and understands that they need to report that to their management or to their IT department, but also understands that means that their laptop is going to get confiscated, their accounts are going to get suspended, if not shut down and deleted. And that's going to ruin their ability to get the thing done they needed to get done so they could go on vacation that day.
Yeah.
And so they don't say anything and they just cross their fingers. That's terrible, because even in an environment where you're encouraging people to not worry about, quote unquote, getting in trouble, that pressure of not being productive can weigh in so strong on their decision to report or not. And so, yeah, I mean, again, to tie it in, if we had the ability to mitigate some of these threats, after detection, in a way that doesn't really take away any productivity, then now you've got the silver bullet solution.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know that when we were in an office, it was a lot easier because, we could have that new laptop to the person and up and running in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I mean, it's one thing I could meet somebody down at our office and hand them off a laptop in an hour or so, assuming both of our schedules align. But what do I do for the people who are on the other side of the country?
Mhm.
Exactly. If you're so
And
it
I
makes it.
think, yeah, I think that the pandemic has really shown some of the cracks in a lot of organizations' remote, working systems deployments. Um, it also showed a lot of interesting new opportunities,
Yeah.
and security is one of them. You know, it goes back to what we were, dreaming about, the ability to complete the security cycle, in a way that now doesn't involve hands-on, which it used to all the time.
Hmm.
That's something, that's a challenge that everyone's going to be facing pretty soon.
Yeah, and also the old practice of having a hardened perimeter. Your where your office is secure and all that,
Oh yeah,
and you're ironclad as long as you're on your network, on the office network. That's a bygone era nowadays in my mind,
yeah,
because we this 2020 has shown us that remote, if you're able to support a remote workforce and you're able to do it well, then that practically guarantees business continuity.
yep,
And
yeah.
we can't go back. I know it completely changed how Jump Cloud views it.
And that's interesting because, yeah, it completely, starts on a whole, like, clean slate for VC and DR plans. Um,
Hmm.
the an organization I've worked with a lot recently never intended to be a remote workforce organization, but what they were doing as just a job perk was allowing a quarter of their workforce on any given day to work from home.
Hmm.
So it was kind of this rotating schedule of, and they were doing a pretty good job of communicating that, and people could schedule around it, and they were a huge Zoom adopter back in the day, which is kind of fortunate now. Um, and when, in what was it, early March 2020, mid March,
Hmm.
when lockdowns really started to happen, the transition from in office to fully remote was seamless for this bunch because everyone had been in practice. Everyone had spent their specific days working from home, and so it was as simple as just saying, starting tomorrow, everybody works from home.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty much exactly what happened here. I mean, we were office centric but remote friendly
mhm,
and that sort of thing. I mean, we had a couple people who were full time remote, but really it was you were in the office, but we're also being a cloud forward company helped out a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, and
We didn't have a lot of on prem stuff to worry about.
that's, yeah, perfect. And that's probably one of the foundations for this kind of new idea is physical. Anything needs to be needs to be done away with for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, but what I was going to follow up with is what I'm seeing now that we've got a year and some months behind us doing this is when I'm asked by a potential client or even a current customer to help them come up with a BCDR plan, I
Mhm.
immediately say, what would it take to get all your people working remotely? Are they doing it today because of the pandemic? And if they are, then that's your DR plan. Just
Yeah.
put it down in writing because what you've been doing for this last year is a perfect DR plan. And in a lot of cases, I say that, and some of these COOs or some CIOs kind of take a step and they think, "Wow, yeah, okay, that's perfect," because in their mind, they were going down that path of, like, we need an alternate office location, we need alternate services, we need, the ability to coordinate all these users and employees to go to a different place and do these different things. And I was like, no, no, you don't. You're already doing it. And
Yeah.
and the best part about a DR plan that's basically send everybody home is that if you do like that client of mine did before and let people, like you said about Jump Cloud, you're remote friendly, let people work, one day a week from home, you have essentially are testing your DR plan like continuously. It's
Exactly.
CI for a DR plan, which is awesome, because the only way to find out your plans don't work is to try them. And yeah, I think that, that's going to be the wave of the next decades, is how a business can quickly accommodate something like that. And just in line with what we were talking about, how does security follow it? One of the things that's really weird right now is that the health regulations and security frameworks have some pretty, how do I say this? Have some pretty direct language about physical security.
Mm-hmm.
And today, I'm 99% sure no one's homes have the kind of security that you would need to attest to high trust. Now, Brian, maybe you have a badge reader on your bathroom door, but most of us don't. And certainly you're not logging who is coming and going from, your workspace. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see evolve with this. Is, are they going to relax the security frameworks to allow what's happening today to keep going, or are we going to see some new interesting technologies to enforce those frameworks, but in a person's home?
Yeah, I mean, the whole shift to remote work really has kind of thrown a monkey wrench into a lot of things, and I am excited to see how all those smart people out there who solve these types of problems are going to solve these.
Yeah, it's going to be some really interesting and unique solutions. If it's going to be anything like kind of the bleeding edge that we've seen before, some of the things we're going to see are going to be a little kludgy, right? It's going to be like, I don't know, that seems a little fragile, and then over time it's going to start to kind of come together. So I'm looking forward to it as well.
What is it, the Amazon's Ring security system, the drones in the Ring stations, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing to worry about. Just an army of AI controlled drones, making sure that the people that are in your house are the right people. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right, so that's all the time we have for today. Again, our guest is Brian Coleman. Thank you very much for joining us today, Brian.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated the conversation. I know we took some weird left turns here and there, but we got to where we wanted to go, and I thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you for tuning in to Where's the Any Key. If you like what you heard, please feel free to subscribe. Again, my name is Ryan Bacon. I lead IT at JumpCloud, where the team here is building a cloud-based directory platform that provides frictionless, secure access to virtually any IT resource from trusted devices anywhere. You can learn more and even set up a free account at jumpcloud.com.